Project Lasagna, Part 1, Bolognese Ragù. Typically you start out with a sofrito, then you put in your pancetta, and then you follow that up with your meat. I changed that order up because it's all about fond development with this, and that's the key. So I actually start out with a pancetta, and in this case, for the large batch I'm making, it's 400 grams of slightly minced pancetta. And I brown that up slowly over a low to medium-low heat. I'm not looking to crisp it immediately. I want to render out as much fat as I possibly can. Over a course of 10 or 15 minutes on low heat, I will keep stirring that around. And as you can see, it slowly renders the fat out. And just as it's starting to brown and crispy, and it's developed a beautiful fond, I'm going to remove it. And I remove all of the pancetta fat except for about a tablespoon or two. And here's the key. I add my beef in small portions, broken up into small pieces. That way the surface area of the nice hot pan will cook the meat, causing it to release its water quickly. And because there's space around all of these, the water will start evaporating much, much, much quicker than it would be if you dumped all the meat in at once. Maybe 200 grams to 300 grams per portion. I've got a nice big pot, so that gives me a lot of surface area. And you can see where a little bit of the water is being shed. It's not forming a little pool for the meat to boil in. At this point, because I had a nice bacon fond, and there's no way that bacon fond is going to last all the way through the cooking without probably burning a little, I hit this with a tiny bit of white wine, maybe about an eighth of a cup, quarter of a cup of wine, just to remove that fond from the bottom and cook that till it was completely evaporated and started forming yet another fond. At that point, when the second fond started to form, I'm adding in some more beef, about another 200 to 300 grams. And again, in small pieces. You can see me tearing it up as I'm doing it here. But basically what happens here is the cool meat cools down the cooking process of the already cooked meat, whereas the heat from both the pan and the already cooked beef warms the other stuff up, causing it to shed its fluid much quicker. So the water comes out, but because there's not a ton of it, it evaporates really quickly. And then I'm adding my third batch of meat. Small pieces, torn up, and, as mentioned, between 200 and 300 grams, give or take. It doesn't have to be exact. You just don't want to crowd the pan with too much uncooked meat. And there we go. We stir it in. As you can see, it doesn't really get swimming in water, and it just starts browning and developing that fond really quickly. You can see it starting to build up here. Already, and we're going into our fourth batch. And this is about halfway, because in this particular one, we did 8 batches before the meat was all in there. So again, a few little pieces. And once we hit about 300 grams or so, 250-ish, start stirring it again. And you can see that fond developing on the bottom. Oh, that caramelizing, beefy goodness. And once that's fully cooked, you add the 5th batch. Because, you know, can't go wrong with a lot of batches. And at this point, this meat is so close to actually getting that sort of brown caramelization, the crispiness on the veal. We don't quite want to get, so that's why this meat cools it down again. Sort of arrests the cooking process for a minute or two, allowing for the shedding of the water. Well, I know you're getting really tired of me saying that. And then we stir it in again. Now, the one nice thing is the water shedding actually helps lift a little bit of the fond up, so it's not just concentrating and building a big thick layer on the bottom. It forms one, then a little bit of it comes off, and more forms, and a little bit of it comes off each time you add a new batch of meat. It cooks really quickly when you add the fresh meat because of the residual heat of both the pan and the already cooked meat. And again, you can see a little bit of the fond lifting up, but a lot of it stays. But none of it is burning. And at this point, I've probably been cooking for about 20 minutes or so. And here we go. Yes, and the 6th batch of meat. We do add a lot of batches. The nice part about this, and this is key, doesn't matter what ragu you're making. If you want to make it better, do this process instead of throwing all your meat in at once. any ingredients that you have for a ragu or a spaghetti sauce or anything, you will get more caramelization on the meat, less boiling, better quality, a lot more flavor. And there we go. That's the 7th batch going in. And more stirring. And you're breaking up those larger pieces into smaller ones. And again, you can see the fond underneath. And each time you add some fresh meat, it gets lifted up a tiny bit and then builds again. And the nice part is that fond keeps getting folded back into the meat, folded back into the meat. So all of the meat is just, has all this caramelization goodness going on in there. That's looking awesome. Stir it constantly during these stages. I mean, I leave it for a minute or two. So I lied. Turns out there's 9 batches of meat going on. You can even see the fond developing up on the sides too. And don't worry, all of that's going to come out. And there, as you can see that, once the last batch gets in and we've browned it up, stirring constantly, this wooden flat utensil is perfect for scraping fond up from the bottom. And there you can see, after cooking that for quite a while, and browning it, look at that gorgeous fond. And we're going to add the bacon back in at this point. And we want to lift that fond up before too much else happens to it, so we're going to add almost the rest of the white wine. Saving a little bit because we may have to do this again. So we're going to use that wine to lift the fond up yet again. And yeah, probably need a little tiny bit more in there. And as you can see, it's, oh, and I forgot a little tiny bit of the bacon. Add that in, and we're just going to evaporate all of that wine. And remove all of the fond, and we've got, oh, a little scrapey scrape there. And we're just going to let that go for a tiny bit. And then we're going to remove the meat from the pot. And then we're going to add our sofrito in, which is, of course, carrots, celery, and onion. And immediately it's going to shed a lot of liquid, and that's going to pick up even more of the fond, remove it from the bottom of the pan. And basically we want to cook this for about 10 to 13 minutes till it gets soft and translucent. It loses a fair bit of moisture, it's kind of dry, and even starts forming a tiny bit of fond on its own. Then we're going to add the beef back in with the bacon. And we're going to mix this thoroughly, and we're going to caramelize this a tiny bit too, because we want more fond. It's all about the fond. Yeah, just building as much flavor into this meat dish as possible. Because we're not using any spices, a lot of the flavor comes from what we're doing to the meat and the sofrito and the pancetta. I know I said bacon, but pancetta is Italian bacon to me. Delicious. So there we have it. Everything's together, forming yet another bit of a fond. I think this is what now, the 5th fond we formed. And there we go. Look at that. Now we're going to add a liter of beef stock. Oh, actually that's the last of the wine, sorry. And we're going to add the last of the wine there. Pick up that last little bit of fond and evaporate this off. Basically, I'm trying to get as much of that browny, caramely goodness back into the meat mixture as I can. And then, gonna add a liter of beef stock. Just thoroughly incorporate that. The next ingredient, milk. Another liter of milk. And it's really nice too because the some of the enzymes in the milk actually help tenderize the meat. And adds a tiny bit of lactose sweetness to it as well. I mean, not that at any point it becomes sweet, but that helps with the acidity of the tomatoes as well. And of course, at this point, adding 2 23-ounce cans of whole San Marzano tomatoes. And I've already taken the liberty of crushing those tomatoes by hand in a pot so I can just dump this in. and then just gently stir it in because I have very little room between the edge of the pot and that. Probably about, as you can see, probably about half an inch maybe. And then we're just going to let this simmer. And I mean simmer. As an end result, I think this simmered for about 12 hours. And there we go, partway through. You can see it thickening up into a kind of a beautiful meat porridge. It kind of clings to the flat utensil there quite nicely. It still has to reduce a tiny bit more, and as you can see, there's probably about 1.5 inches down from the edge of the pot. And here we go, about 2.5 inches down from the edge of the pot, nice thick meat porridge. And that's what a Ragù Bolognese should be like. It really should be meat porridge. And you'll note that it has a nice orange cast to it. It's not red at all, because even though it has tomatoes in it, this is not a tomato sauce. This is a bolognese. It's a meat sauce. And that's what makes it delicious. I love these slow motion pours. And don't forget, like, and subscribe to me. And make a comment. Tell me what you think of this recipe. Or my take on this recipe. Oh, that looks so glistening, delicious, orangey good. Here's the ingredients. And then we're on to part 2, fior di latte, fresh mozzarella.